The events in this story took place about 2 months ago, and I'm still not fully able to be home by myself. Background information is pretty important to my story, so I'll go over that quickly. I live in a typical suburban neighborhood, with most houses being lined up pretty close to each other. New homes are still being built on most streets, the empty lot next door to me being one of them. There were usually about 7 to 10 construction workers working at the lot next door, and most of the time they didn't acknowledge us. Some would say hello or wave, but for the most part they kept to themselves. One morning, as I was climbing into my car to go to a 9:30 class, I was stopped by one of the construction workers. He walked over to my car, and leaned over my open door. This guy was short and stocky, with a bushy beard. He looked to be in his late 40s or so, and I could tell even from where he was standing that he was a smoker. He had a clipboard in one hand and a walkie-talkie in the other, and wore a typical yellow construction helmet. I looked next door and only saw 2 other workers at the very back of the lot, but there usually was only a handful there in the early morning. The guy just kind of stood there, not saying anything at first. "You live here, right? At this house?" he asked. He sounded strangely anxious, and kept glancing at the lot. I thought this was an odd question, considering he just watched me exit my house. And would, assumingly, have watched me do this every day. I answered yes, that I did live here, and tried to close my car door as politely as I could. He gripped it, stopping me, and, how noisy has it been? The construction. Is it disruptive? He asked. He kept talking like he couldn't remember what he wanted to say. I told him that the noise didn't bother us and yanked my car door closed. He held onto it tighter and continued asking me questions, if construction materials had been left in our yard, if the crew had been littering, etc. I told him we had no complaints and asked him to move out of the way, and what times of the day are you usually at the house? He asked in a more assertive tone. This made me feel extremely uncomfortable, and I quickly lied that it was different every day. I finally yanked the door out of his hands and drove away. I had stopped to get some food with a friend after school, so I ended up getting home at around 6:30 that afternoon. I pulled up to an empty driveway, my brothers being at work and my parents probably still on their way home. A pickup truck was still parked next door, which was odd. The crew never stayed this late. I didn't think much of it though, and made sure to lock up when I got inside. I headed upstairs and spent the next 20 minutes on my laptop, when I heard a bang downstairs. I have 3 cats who like to get into our metal garbage can. So I assumed it was them knocking it over again. I was halfway down the stairs when I heard a groan, and someone curse under their breath. My heart nearly leapt into my throat. I peeked around through the railing of our stairs and saw a figure trying to force his way through my sliding glass door. There was a metal bar installed on the track of our patio door, which only allowed the door to slide less than a foot open. The figure was trying to maneuver his way through this crack in the doorway, grunting and swearing the whole time. I pulled out my phone to call the police, when my phone fell out of my hands and down the stairs, crashing with each step. He froze and looked at me and began trying even harder to get into the house. I could tell right away that it was the construction worker from earlier. He was nearly halfway in when my parents pulled into our driveway. He saw the headlights and immediately wiggled his way back out, running into the woods behind my house. As you can imagine, my parents went insane. I gave a detailed description to my parents, who then went to the construction company and tried to identify the men. But nobody at the construction company matched the description, or even knew of someone who matched the description. The uniform I had described did not match theirs, and they said they didn't ask neighbors questions while building the homes. This guy posed as a construction worker intending to either rob us, or worse. As of now, we still have no idea who this man was. Take this as a warning, always ask anybody in uniform, a cop, a construction worker, an electrician, for some sort of identification before offering them information, or inviting them into your home. I almost got kidnapped by a fake hotel employee. This happened when I was 10 years old. I was at a ski resort with my dad, stepmom, and 3 sisters. When this happened, my 2 sisters, dad, and stepmom were still out skiing, but me and my sister Ava got cold, so we went back to the hotel to get some food. We sat at the restaurant in the hotel until my stepmom came down. We asked her if she could hold the table so we could go up to the room quickly so that we could drop off our ski jackets. So take the elevator, and once we get off we start to walk to our room. That's when I hear someone behind me go, "Hey." Keep in mind we were both about 11 at the time. I didn't think he was talking to us, so I just ignored it. We walked into our room, but before we can close the door, the man steps in the doorway. He was tall, probably about 6 feet, and looked pretty old, maybe about in his early 60s or late 50s, and he was wearing the hotel staff uniform but just without the logos. The thing that raised a big red flag was that he was wearing black surgical gloves. He says, "Hey, I was talking to you." We spin around, caught off guard. "Ava," says us. He goes, "You. I was wondering if you could grab a pitcher for me and come into my room to pour some water for me. Our parents always told us never trust strangers, and we already got a bad vibe from him, so we politely declined." His tone then got a bit annoyed and he said, "It will just take a second. Can you please just pour me some water in my room?" At this point we already knew this wasn't right, so we said no again. This conversation went back and forth for about 3 minutes until he tried to walk into our room. Our instincts kicked in at this point and I ran towards the door and said, "Sir, we are good," and I slammed the door on him. Ava and I sat in the hotel room for about 10 minutes panicking on how we are going to leave to talk our parents because we had left our phones downstairs. We looked out of the peephole and he was gone, so we bolted down the hallway and ran back down the stairs to the restaurant. Once we told our stepmom, she was mortified and went to office security. They interviewed us and asked for his description because they didn't have any cameras in the hallway. We gave them the description and they told us that nobody with that description worked there and that most of them were young broke college students. At this point it really set in that if I had accepted and just helped him I might have died. So everyone teach your kids stranger danger and creepy hotel guy. Let's not meet again. Fake delivery guy. My younger sibling has a couple of medical conditions requiring supplies, and my hometown has a pharmacy with a delivery service. We often got deliveries from them. When I was in middle school, my mom got a different job, which meant that I would get home about 2 hours before everyone else, and I'd be in the house by myself. A few weeks after the start of school, right after I got home, a guy rang the doorbell and said he was from the pharmacy. He had the uniform shirt on, and was holding a small bag with their logo on it. I started to unlock the door and went as far to take the deadbolt and the top lock off when I happened to think about the fact that the guy had sunglasses and a hat on, and jeans underneath the uniform shirt, whereas most of their drivers were very professional looking. I looked down at the street and saw that there wasn't one of their delivery cars anywhere. Plus the bag he had was really small, and the deliveries we usually got were a lot bigger. I told him to wait a minute and called my mom to ask if we were expecting a small delivery. She told me that we weren't expecting any delivery and to tell the guy that he must have the wrong house. I went back to the door and told him through the door I thought he had the wrong house, and he started insisting it was the right one, and he knew our last name. I asked him which person the medicine was for and he didn't know. I told him that we would just pick up the medicine at the pharmacy, and he started to get mad and say it didn't make any sense and that your parents are going to be mad at you if they don't get this delivery. At this point I was getting scared because he wasn't leaving. Right after he said that, my uncle who lived nearby was coming up our stairs to pick up something. When the guy turned around and saw him, he went down the stairs and said, "Wrong house," to my uncle and jumped in his car and left. My mom called the pharmacy when she got home and they didn't have any drivers who matched the guy's description or any deliveries scheduled for us, and the pharmacy manager was really disturbed because she said one of their workers had had his work shirt stolen out of his gym locker a few weeks before. I completely refused to be at home by myself for months after that, and it still creeps me out to think of how close I was to opening the door, and the fact that he knew our last name.